Hi, my name is Justin, aka Ghost Reader, and today I am going to be talking about what I read for the month of December 2018. I actually ended up reading a lot last month, or finishing up some books from the month before, so let's go ahead and jump in. So, first, what I want to talk about are my quarterly reads. Um, I finally finished War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. I read like 200 books, 200 pages, about maybe 280 pages of this in physical copy, and then I read the rest as an audiobook. I really like this story. It's not for everyone, I would say, because it's very long, um, and there are actually, depending on what version you get, what edition you get, he actually has essays, literal essays, scattered throughout this book on different topics like the nature of war, philosophy, the fact that historians have been looking at history wrong. So for a lot of people, this could be a very not easy book to read, but I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed looking at basically it follows the Rostovs, two Russian families, the Rostovs and the Bolkonskis, and the people around them. I'm going to add Pierre as another person because he's kind of like a outsider to these two families, but he and basically looks at them as basically the children are becoming maturing and coming to their own during the time when Russia is at war with France on two separate occasions. Because there's one war happens, ends, another war starts, and also ends during this book. And you see like a lot of growth from the characters. You see a lot of loss from the characters. Basically, I think that this book really should have been named War and Love because I feel like this book examines what it is to love other people, that true happiness comes from loving other people, and what happens when you either don't love someone or that love is betrayed. So this is a very well written book. I can see why some people would consider it the greatest novel of all time. And I'm very glad that I finally got through it and can say that I've read War and Peace. But this is quite the read. Next, what my actual because that book took me 6 months. I actually should have been finished with it way before December. But this book I was supposed to read from October to December, and that was the Essential Tales and Poems of Edgar Allan Poe. I really like Edgar Allan Poe. Really like his short stories. A lot of these I hadn't read before. So like I have read The Pit and the Pendulum before. Read the Fall of the House of Usher. Yeah. The Telltale Heart, but I hadn't read The Black Cat, The Mystery of Monsieur Valdemar, The Murder in the Rue Morgue, and there's some other stories in here that I hadn't read before that were actually really good. And I'm really glad that I finally got to read a lot more work by Edgar Allan Poe. He was probably one of the first writers I've read in the horror genre, and I really like his writing, and enjoyed all the short stories that I read in this book. And I'm not sure what my favorite one would be. What would my favorite one would be? I really like The Pit and the Pendulum. That was really good. The Fall of the House of Usher is also another one that's really good. But The Black Cat and the Telltale Heart are actually pretty cool too. So there are a lot of stuff by Edgar Allan Poe that I liked, and I'm really glad that I got to read this last month. Some other reads that I read are two graphic novels, and that were Paper Girls by Brian Vaughan. He's the same guy who writes Saga and also The Walking Dead. This is volume 3. I've had volume 4. I got it at BookCon last year and was waiting to get volume 3. I finally picked it up, and it was good. I liked it. I like where the story's going so far, and I hope that going forward that we start to get some answers to some of the plot points that are happening, because basically these four paper girls are now time traveling, and they're trying to figure out like basically who's behind all the stuff that's been going on, not only back in their timeline but throughout time. And so you don't really get any answers in this book. The mystery kind of deepens, so we'll see where that mystery goes going forward. And then the other book that I read was Deadly Class, and this is the first volume, and I basically picked this up after watching the pilot of Deadly Class on YouTube. So if I put the first episode on YouTube, and I never heard Deadly Class before, And so after watching that, I was like, all right, well, let me see what the source material is like. And I think the show, the pilot was good, and I think that the this graphic novel is also good. That's based off of, basically, it's about this kid, Alex, Marcus. Why did I think of Alex? Marcus. He is basically on the street, homeless, and basically he is taken in by this school called King's Dominion, where basically all the children, or the teenagers in the school, are raised or taught to be assassins. And so he joins them. He's an outsider and going to basically a place where being an outsider, not in a particular clique or gang in the school, can literally mean you getting killed or worse. So basically, it's him trying to come to terms with the fact that he lost his parents and his place in this new school and this new environment and where he fits in. And there's a lot of danger going on. He's a lot of danger for him because he's new to the school and everyone's out to prove him because he has a reputation for being a killer and psychopath, but not everything is as it seems when it comes to that. So I thought that the first volume was good. I kind of want to see what happens in the second volume, so I may pick that up in the future. A book that I read for my book club that I'm part of, as part of Discord book club, was Washington Black. So hopefully none of them watch this before we talk about the actual book. But Washington Black was by ESA Edugan. I think that's how you say it. And so basically is about a black slave boy who he's on a plantation, and the basic plantation comes under new ownership. There's two brothers. One of the brothers is really scientific. One of them is just running the plantation because it's due to his father. And the scientific one basically takes Washington Black, that's the slave boy's name, under his wing. Well, George Washington Black is his whole name, under his wing. And there's a series of events that happens that precipitate them running away. And basically it's kind of about the boy's journey through life, kind of finding himself after he has to flee the plantation, and basically coming into his own in a way. This book actually, I believe, won the Man Booker Prize. I thought that it was a good read, but not great. It was good but not great. The ending kind of just left. The ending wasn't satisfying in my opinion. The story I liked the story. I liked Washington Black's character. I think that but I think while there was depth to the story, it just didn't grab me at all when it came to this book. I wouldn't consider it like a prize winner book, in my opinion. I'm not sure what else was up there. I didn't read any other Man Booker awards. I'm pretty sure this thing won the Man Booker. I could be wrong about that, but I'm not sure who the competition was, but I wouldn't consider this necessarily, just from reading it, to be like an award-winning book. It was good, but it wasn't like mind-blowingly great. So that was Washington Black. The next book that I actually finished reading from the month before was The Pope Who Would Be King by The Pope Who Would Be King, The Exile of Pius IX and the Emergence of Modern Europe by David Kurtzer. And basically this book is about Pope Pius IX. He became Pope, and a lot of people thought he was going to be very liberal and introduce a constitution to the Papal States. And while he did take some steps to be to introduce some liberal ideals to the Papal States, he didn't want to go as far as giving the people a constitution and ruling as a constitutional monarch, or worse, make it a republic. But the people thought he was going in that direction, and when he didn't go in that direction, everyone was disappointed, got mad, and he ended up having to run away. And he was basically, all those events turned him staunchly against any sort of liberalism or constitution talk at all in the Papal States. It kind of hardened his decision into being basically a conservative. And this was happening around the time that a lot of Europe was changing, where people were saying we don't want kings anymore. We can have kings, but we do need to have a constitution. We can share power, but the people need to have a say in it. And so this is happening around the revolutions of 1848. And so this was a very interesting book. I know some about the revolution of 1848 because I listened to a podcast on revolutions, but this was a very close examination of what was happening in the Papal States, and also um, a very close view of what was going on with the Pope and his thoughts on some of the stuff that was happening. So this was a really good book, and kind of, I gained some more knowledge about history in this era that I didn't know before. Another book that I read that was really that was exciting for me was the Ballad of Black Tom. I was recommended this book by someone on Discord with the name Cthulhu, and which is quite interesting because Cthulhu is actually featured in the story, I believe. I'm pretty sure it's Cthulhu and Jesse from both sides of books. This story basically revisits H.P. Lovecraft's the horror at Red Hook, and follows the stories through the eyes of a black man who comes to be known as Black Tom. And it was very, very well written. Very good look at racism at that time. This happens in like the early, if I'm not mistaken, the early 1900s. And it's just a really great horror story. I don't really read much horror story. This is the first modern horror story that I've read. I read it as an audiobook, and I've listened to like some horror podcasts where they read like short stories that people submit, but this is the first time I actually read like a book about horror. And even though I do have a whole collection of H.P. Lovecraft's stuff up there that I want to read someday, this was very, very good. The guy did a very good job with the character of Black Tom at showing how racism affected him, how it affects his decisions and his interactions with other people, with the dark events that are going on at the time all this is happening. So it was just a really good book. If you like horror, and you're looking for a good read, I would highly suggest you read this book. And last but not least, a book that I read but I haven't finished yet and will finish at my leisure, is Bible Literalism, a Gentile Heresy by John Shelby Sponge. I think Spong. And basically this book, the guy makes an argument that reading the Bible literally is not something that the original writers and readers of the Torah, or in this case the Gospel of Matthew, which he uses as an example, would not have read the books as literal, and that is something that as Christianity spread into among the Gentiles, that Gentiles began to read it as literal, whereas the Jews who originally held it, read it, would have seen it as mainly allegorical, or like telling, or basically allegorical stories that gave lessons but were not literal things that actually happened. And so I thought from the title, I thought it would be quite interesting. I like reading books about Christianity. I myself am a Christian, and I like to read from time to time things that challenge my beliefs, or open up my eyes to new things. And this was definitely opening my eyes to some things to take into consideration. And so that's a book that I will finish in my leisure at some point in the future. Alright, so that's it for me. That is what I read in the month of December, the very last month of the year. I had a very good time reading these books. So if you like this video, please hit the like button. If you want to see more videos from me, please subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at GhostReads28, and also on Goodreads. The link to that is down in the description box below. So as always, keep reading.